Alright, so I know I'm a little bit late getting to this bullet review. As a matter of fact, I'm kind of a lot late. There's been a whole lot of things going on over the last couple of months that have kept my time occupied and really not allowed me to get to all of the regularly scheduled style videos that I normally do. But we're going to do our best to go ahead and make up for that. And we're going to start making up for that by reviewing the bullet, the 7mm bullet that has probably been the most asked about 7mm bullet out of all the 7mm bullets that I've been asked to review. And that is the 197 Sierra Match King. So the 197 Sierra Match King, as far as I'm aware, is the heaviest for caliber, highest ballistic coefficient bullet in the 7mm family. It is an absolute monster of a 7mm bullet. I mean, you're looking at a bullet that is 15 grains heavier than Sierra's other largest 7mm bullet with the 183 Match King. And this bullet actually has a lot in common with the 183 Match King. So let's get into the nuts and bolts of it. So obviously this is a 7mm 284 caliber bullet. It has a sectional density of 0.349. It has an overall length of 1.687 inches, and the recommended twist rate, which is something I find interesting, the recommended twist rate for this bullet, being such a heavy bullet, as a matter of fact, usually what you see as far as twist rates for the heavy for class 180 class 7mm bullets is typically a 1 in 8 twist. This thing is actually recommended in a 1 in 7.5 twist. Now I will say this is a 1 in 8 twist. You guys just saw me the other day do a video shooting this thing out to 2,400 yards, getting it done very easily with the 187 or with the 197 Match King, and I have no doubt that I'll be able to take this out much further than that. So there will be videos coming out here in the very near future of me shooting this thing out well beyond that 2,400 yards. I had actually taken the 183 Match King last year out to almost just under 2,500 yards, and I feel pretty confident we'll be able to surpass that with the 197. But as far as the recommended twist rate, it says it's recommended for a 1 in 7.5 twist. Now, like I said, I've been shooting it at a 1 in 8. I've shot matches with this bullet. I've done ELR with this bullet. I've done a number of things, and I've had no problem stabilizing it in a 1 in 8 twist and stabilizing it to the point where even out well past transonic, the bullet just flew completely true. So sometimes I take some of these recommended twist rates with a grain of salt, and there's also such thing as overspinning your bullet. And one of the things I'd rather do for me personally, is be on the edge of stability rather than over stabilizing my bullet. So that is one of the things you'll notice when I do the 110 Match King. We did the 110 Match King review, all the ELR shots that I've been doing with the 1 in 10 Match King or 110 Match King, that is a bullet that has a 1 in 7 recommended twist, and you guys have seen me shoot that thing out to 2,300 yards and stabilize it no issues in a 1 in 8. So like I said, sometimes I take some of those recommended twist rates with a grain of salt. So the me-plat of this 7mm 197 Match King, the me-plat is just like most of Sierra's Match Kings in this style of Match King bullet. They're really high match grade style Match Kings, and that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but there's different types of Match Kings. So you'll notice that there are some Match Kings that have a very secant ogive, or very tangent ogive, I should say, not tipped, not factory tipped or anything like that, and they're still Sierra Match Kings. But there's also another class of Sierra Match Kings that are just completely focused on uniformity and really high ballistic coefficients, and that's what this falls into with the 197 Match King. It has a completely uniformed tipped me-plat. So this is a factory tipped bullet. So in the factory, before it leaves the factory, they are actually running these things through a tipping die, giving them a completely uniform tip. And what does that do? As we've talked about in the past, not only does it slightly raise your ballistic coefficient, but that's not really the thing that they're after. What it does is it uniforms your ballistic coefficient. So it allows for each bullet to fly completely uniformly because they've taken the extra step of tipping this bullet. The ogive of this bullet, it has, so we talked about a second ago, secant and tangent ogives. This thing has a completely secant ogive, so it is there is almost no radius to this ogive. It is very straight and pointed, not giving any sort of radius on it to give it any sort of tangent style. One of the things that's very interesting about this bullet, and it's another thing that you'll see in that class of Match King bullets that I was just talking about, one of the things that they've done with this bullet is the the place where it actually transitions to the bearing surface, which the bearing surface is something we'll talk about here in just a second. The spot where this bullet, where the ogive transitions into the bearing surface, they've done something that I find that I really like what they do with this. It allows for the bullet to start perfectly straight down the tube each time. Is they've given it a 1.5 degree angle for that transition to the ogive, or to the bearing surface from the ogive. And what that does is that allows it to line up perfectly as it goes down the tube, starting it perfectly straight each and every time. That 1.5 degree angle is something that is typically you'll find in most match chambers, and it just allows it to perfectly match up to that match chamber and start in a perfect orientation every time with not a whole lot of run out or anything like that. The bearing surface on this is a extremely long bearing surface. It has a very long ogive, but the bearing surface on this is extra long. One of the things that you'll notice, this bullet, if you set it down next to a 183 Match King, which I have done, and we'll show you guys some pictures of it, this has not only the same exact ogive as the 197 Match King, or 183 Match King. The 197 and the 183 have the exact same ogive, the exact same boat tail, exact same tip. The only difference in between these two bullets, as far as I can tell by my eye, is the length of the bearing surface. The length of the bearing surface in the 197 Match King is significantly longer than the 183 Match King, and that's where it gets that extra length, and its higher sectional density and ballistic coefficient and all that. So that is something that you will notice if you look at these two bullets side by side. It's basically the same bullet, just the 197 has a much longer bearing surface. And just like we just talked about, the boat tail of this is identical to the 183 Match King, which is also similarly angled to the ogive. So it's a nice uniformly angled ogive and boat tail. The ballistic coefficient. So just like if you guys have watched any of my other bullet reviews, you know how I do this. We will give the factory ballistic coefficient, and then we will give what my true results for ballistic coefficient. And one of the things that I was extremely pleasantly surprised to see, and I shouldn't be super surprised because this has actually happened in a different Sierra Match King video, or I'm sorry, a different Sierra Match King bullet that I reviewed, is this actually turned out to be better than advertised, at least in my particular barrel. The true ballistic coefficients that I turned up in this 7 SAUM, this 30-inch McGowan 7 SAUM barrel, were higher than the ballistic coefficients that Sierra is advertising for this particular bullet. So Sierra's advertised ballistic coefficient, and something I've said in the past, something I really wish they would do differently. I wish they would give a G1 and a G7 ballistic coefficient. That's something that other companies do, even though some other companies have a tendency to really exaggerate some of their ballistic coefficients, and I don't find that Sierra really does that. A lot of companies will be giving you the G1 and G7, which I kind of appreciate. It makes my job a little easier when I'm doing these reviews. But the G1 ballistic coefficient for the Sierra Match King is now they break these down into 3 sections. They do this for all of this class of Sierra Match Kings. The G1 from whatever speed down to 2,300 feet per second. So 2,300 feet per second and above, they're giving you a 0.780 G1 ballistic coefficient. So that's typically out to, that very first one. If you watch the truing ballistic coefficient video that I did a while back, that's that first step, that out to 600 yards or so. They're between 1,500 to 2,300 feet per second. So that would be that out to just above transonic zone. They're looking at a 0.765, and then they're 1,550 feet per second and below, they're looking at a 0.711. So really high for a 7mm bullet, no matter how you cut it. But one of the things, like I said, that I was really happy to see is that my particular true ballistic coefficients in this barrel turned out to be higher than what they're advertising. So I usually true mine I do almost all my bullet truing in the G7. So I did transfer all that to G1 for this review, just to give you an idea, but I'll also give you my G7 results. So from 0 to 600 yards, so that is a speed of 2,280 feet per second. So that's right in line with their 2,300 feet per second and above reading here. So I got a .786 in the G1. So compared to their .780, it's actually higher out to the 600-yard mark. Then for mine out to 1,450 yards, closing in on that transonic zone, or 1,500 feet per second, and where they give you a 1,550 feet per second and above. So for that same range for me, I got a .770, whereas they got a .765. So still a little bit above what they're advertising. And then my ELR, what I do for ELR distances, so that 1,900 feet per, or 1,900 yards, or 1,150 feet per second and below, I'm getting a .729. Whereas their lowest, they're doing a .711, so significantly higher, and that was all the way across the board. My true ballistic coefficient turned out to be higher than their advertised. Now, in my G7, that turned out to be, the out to 600 was a .402, so really outrageously high G7. My out to 1,450 yards ended up being a .393, and then out to the ELR distances, I got a .366 for that beyond transonic, actually beyond subsonic ballistic coefficient. So really, either way, even with mine being higher than theirs, even the numbers that they're giving you is something close enough to what I've got that I could literally plug that in to a ballistic solver, to whatever distance I'm trying to shoot to, and be really close to being waterline impacted right off the bat. So that's something that and that's typically what I find with most Sierra Match King bullets that I review, is that they do not exaggerate their ballistic coefficients. As a matter of fact, in some cases, like you guys have seen in the past, and in this case, their ballistic coefficients turn out to, their advertised ballistic coefficients turn out to be lower than what my true ballistic coefficients results are. So I really appreciate that. The product number, if you are looking to buy a 197, if you're looking to buy the 197 Match Kings, if you're looking for a 100-round box of 197 Match Kings, you're looking at the product number being 1997, so 1997. That you should be able to plug that into any of your Mid-Souths or Midways. Plug that number into the search bar, and if they provide, or if they sell the 197 Match King, it should pop up in your product. Right, so as far as I'm aware, there are no companies, no factory ammo makers making 197 or loading a 197 Match King into factory ammo. That's not something I'm really surprised about. Like we talked about, it is a bullet that says it requires a 1 7.5 twist, even though you guys have seen me stabilize it no issues in a 1 8 twist. But most companies, when they're looking at doing factory ammo, they're going to want to load a bullet that is going to shoot well across all different rifles, and not something that has to really be fine-tuned for a rifle that has to be built specifically for a certain bullet. That's something that we do as hand loaders. So if you're a hand loader, you'll have no problem. Depending on what rifle you're running, the 197 Match King may be a great bullet for you. I will say, I actually kind of shied away from the 197 Match King originally, and for good reason. When I ran the numbers, when I ran a generic load test, looking at the numbers compared to the 183 Match King load that I used to shoot, or was shooting for ELR shots last season, the 197 Match King, because I was going to take a significant velocity hit in that 28-inch barrel, didn't give me enough ballistic coefficient gain to really be beneficial out at those further distances. But now that I'm running this 30-inch barrel, I was able to get this thing up to enough velocity that that velocity carried out with that ballistic coefficient to give me a actually significant advantage over the 183 Match King out at those ELR distances. So that is something to be aware of, that sometimes, like we did a video a while back called balancing ballistic coefficient and velocity, and that is something to be aware of with this bullet. If you're not running if you're not able to get this up to fast enough velocities, it may not really be beneficial to you. So this has been the review of the 197 Match King. I hope this is helpful. I hope you guys are looking for a new 7mm bullet that you can run out to ELR distances, shoot great even at the closer distances. You may want to check out the 197 Match King. So I hope you guys enjoy this. I'll see you guys next time. I'm out.